For officers Harlan and Vance, abuse of power had become routine. They harassed, threatened and brutalized without consequence, believing the badge made them untouchable. So when they saw Aaliyah Thompson, black, alone and well-dressed, stepping out of a luxury boutique, they didn't hesitate. They assumed she didn't belong, accused her of theft and slammed her to the ground. When she resisted their control, she looked like an easy target. What they didn't know was that her husband Marcus was a Delta Force commander, trained lethal, and nearby he saw everything. And when they laid hands on his wife, their authority met its match. They thought it would go the way it always had, but this time they chose the wrong couple, and now the Thompsons are coming for justice, with the truth, with discipline, and with nothing left to lose. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. The afternoon sun bathed Atlanta's Buckhead district in a golden hush, casting long shadows beneath the palms that lined the sidewalks and glinting off the chrome trim of polished SUVs parked along the street. The air was warm and still, heavy with the fragrance of magnolias and the faint scent of expensive cologne trailing from boutique doors that seemed to open only for a certain kind of customer. Aaliyah Thompson stepped onto the sidewalk from the cool interior of LX, one of the city's most exclusive clothing stores, where velvet-lined fitting rooms and quiet, eager saleswomen promised elegance in every seam. She held a slim shopping bag in her left hand and her phone in the other, eyes flicking briefly across the screen to check the time. She smiled when she saw the message circling the block, "Be there in 5." She tapped a quick reply, tucked the phone into her purse, and started down the sidewalk with the quiet poise of a woman who belonged, not because of her money or the dress in her bag, but because she had fought hard for this kind of ordinary peace. Her green dress shimmered softly with each step, flowing around her legs, her heels clicking confidently as she walked. A few heads turned. She didn't notice or pretended not to. Aaliyah wasn't used to taking time for herself, not really. As a high-powered defense attorney in the city's most cutthroat law firm, her days were usually packed with filings, hearings, and holding her own across conference tables lined with older men who still underestimated her until she opened her mouth. But today was different. Today was for her, for them. Marcus had insisted. It had taken 3 calendar reschedules, 1 firm cancellation, and a playful but stern "I didn't leave Delta just to spend our lives apart" before she finally agreed to a break. And now here she was, with a soft new dress and a smile that lingered quietly beneath her surface. She reached the corner and paused beneath the shade of a decorative awning. From this spot she could see a sliver of the main road where Marcus would eventually pull up in their matte black SUV. His taste had always leaned practical, military, clean, silent, efficient, but she had convinced him to add a few comforts: leather seats, heated steering wheel. It was one of the many things they had learned to meet in the middle. On their marriage wasn't flashy. It was solid, built on the foundation of shared ambition, trust, and survival. They had both lived through the kinds of storms that left other people hollow. Marcus rarely spoke of his time overseas, but sometimes when the house was too quiet, she could hear it in the way he breathed, and she too carried her own shadows, disappointments, sacrifices, the small daily cuts of being the only black woman in the room, again and again required to be twice as composed just to be seen as enough. As she stood by the awning waiting, she noticed it again, that shift, the subtle change in air that black women in America were trained to feel. Attention, not loud or obvious, but they're all the same. A passing glance held too long. A security guard inside the boutique who had lingered a little too close as she paid, pretending to tidy the jewelry case. The way the 2 women leaving the cafe across the street had looked her up and down, not out of admiration but calculation. Aaliyah wasn't a stranger to it. She didn't wear her success as armor, but she understood that in places like this, where wealth and whiteness often blended into the same fabric, her presence still came with a question mark. She adjusted the strap of her purse and looked down the street again, eyes scanning calmly. Still no sign of Marcus's car, but she wasn't worried. He was probably caught in traffic at the light or chatting with the old veteran who ran the cigar shop 2 blocks over. Marcus had a way of finding conversations wherever he went, but with her he always made it back on time. She took a slow breath and looked back toward the store. Through the tinted glass she could still see the saleswoman who had helped her, now chatting With another customer it had been a pleasant enough experience even if the woman had initially assumed she was browsing for someone else. That was always the first assumption, but Aaliyah knew how to correct people with poise. She turned again, watching a patrol car roll to a stop across the street. Two officers stepped out casually, stretching their legs. She didn't pay them much attention at first. They were just part of the background, like the LA boys and dog walkers that moved along this district in a steady rhythm, and yet she felt the pause, that subtle disruption in her surroundings, a hesitation where there should have been motion. One of the officers was looking at her. She straightened her shoulders without meaning to and turned back toward the road, her eyes returning to her phone screen. Still no new message, but her fingers hovered for a moment, her instincts not loud yet but alert. She knew the way again. Days could follow too long, and she knew what it could mean when attention shifted from curiosity to entitlement. Still, she told herself, it was just another quiet day, another sunny afternoon where she had done nothing wrong, where she could wait for her husband in peace. She just didn't know that peace was about to end. Aaliyah adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder as she stepped further from the boutique entrance, letting her eyes wander down the block once more. The sunlight had shifted slightly, casting a soft golden hue across the sidewalk as the distant sound of a delivery truck rumbled through the adjacent intersection. The dress in her shopping bag swayed gently with her movement, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel the quiet satisfaction of this small, well-earned indulgence. Her fingers hovered near her phone, debating whether to call Marcus or just wait, until she spotted the familiar sleek silhouette of their SUV. She trusted he'd be close. Always punctual, always precise, but there was something oddly still in the air, a kind of pause in the natural rhythm of the street that made her glance over her shoulder. Behind her, across the street, two police officers stood by their cruiser with the relaxed posture of men who didn't need to hurry. One was older, broad and square-shouldered, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his cap. The other, younger and leaner, leaned against the hood of the car, his gaze flickering up briefly from a phone in his hand. She didn't recognize them, nor did she particularly care to. Still, instinct told her they were looking too long. She returned her attention to the sidewalk ahead, her pace smooth and unhurried, but it wasn't long before the steady beat of footsteps broke the ambient buzz of the street. Measured, deliberate, the kind of walk meant to be heard. Aaliyah's shoulders tensed slightly, her expression composed. As she kept walking, "Afternoon, ma'am," a voice called from behind, calm and performed with the polished veneer of politeness that felt more like control than courtesy. She stopped, turning slightly to meet the source of the voice, the older officer, Harlan. She now saw from the badge nestled under the edge of his vest stood a few paces away, one hand resting on his belt, the other gesturing casually, as if this were the beginning of any normal civil exchange. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said, offering a smile that didn't seem to reach his eyes, his gaze lingering on her just a little too long. Aaliyah returned a courteous nod, choosing her words with measured calm. "It is." He stepped a bit closer, casually, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. "You shop around here often?" he asked, nodding toward the bag at her side, his voice low and conversational, though the undercurrent of something else, curiosity, entitlement, was already sliding beneath the surface from time to time. She replied, adjusting her posture slightly, not defensive, just firmer. "LX," he continued, tilting his head as if to study her more closely. "Nice place. That's where you were just now, right? Not too many folks walk out of there with something in hand, especially looking like that." The way he said it lightly with a forced air of charm made her pulse tighten. She forced a neutral tone. "Yes, I made a purchase. Looks like you made the place look better walking out than it did when you walked in," Harlan added, eyes scanning her figure with open boldness. "Now got to say that dress does wonders for your shape." "I'm meeting someone," she said, no longer playing along. "So I'll be going." Harlan let out a short chuckle, gesturing toward the sidewalk ahead of her. "We can walk with you. Make sure you stay safe. Plenty of eyes out here, but not all of them friendly." Vance, his partner, finally approached from behind, saying nothing but standing close enough to make his silent presence feel like another wall closing in. He avoided Aaliyah's eyes, his posture unsure, his hands twitching at his sides. Harlan grinned. "You don't need to be in such a rush. Man like that ought to be lucky to have a woman like you." "I said I'm meeting my husband," she repeated, slower this time, more pointed, "and I'm Not interested in conversation. Harlan raised his eyebrows, feigning offense. Though his smile never fully faded. "Wu now didn't mean to step on any toes. You don't have to get defensive. You followed me. You're making comments about my body. And you're standing far too close for comfort. That's not a conversation." "Well, maybe I just appreciate confidence," Harlan replied, folding his arms. "You've got that don't talk to me attitude, like you own this street. I figured you must have known somebody important." Aaliyah straightened her shoulders, her voice cool and clipped. "I know myself. That's enough." Harlan chuckled again, but this time it was quieter, more bitter around the edges. "I see how it is. You think you're better than the rest of us." She turned to walk past him. "I think this conversation is over." He stepped into her path before she could pass, his smile gone now. "Hold on, where are you rushing off to?" "I told you I'm meeting someone. If there's no official reason to detain me, I'll be going." Harlan's voice lowered. "Why so anxious, ma'am? We just asking some questions." "Seems like you're trying awful hard to leave." Aaliyah's lips pressed into a line. "Because I have every right to." Harlan leaned in, his tone shifting completely. "People shoplift out of that store all the time. You know, don't matter how they're dressed. Sometimes the ones who look the part are the ones you have to watch closest." Vance cleared his throat. Harlan raised a hand to silence him. "It's our duty to follow up on suspicious activity. Just doing our jobs. There was nothing suspicious about me." "Aaliyah said you approached me. You created this, then prove me wrong," Harlan said, nodding toward the shopping bag. "Let's take a look." "Just the receipt, that's all." Aaliyah took a step back. "No, you have no right to search my bag, and you know it." Harlan's tone flattened. "Then I'll have to consider your refusal to cooperate part of a larger problem." She narrowed her eyes. "Which is possible shoplifting," he replied, tapping his radio. "You match a description. Black female, dress, leaving LX with a suspicious item." Aaliyah stared at him. "There was no report. You just made that up." Harlan tilted his head. "How would you know that unless you had something to hide?" She opened her mouth to respond, but the air shifted again, sharper, now colder, though the sun still burned overhead. "Leadin' not do this here," he added, "unless you want this to get louder." Aaliyah stood her ground, shoulders squared beneath the weight of the officer's gaze, her jaw set in firm control. The sun still shone down on Peachtree Street as if nothing had shifted, but everything had. A line had been crossed, and she knew it the moment Harlan tapped his radio and invoked a lie, a false report, a made up description, a trap disguised as protocol. "Let's not do this here," Harlan repeated, his voice tight with manufactured concern. "We're just trying to sort things out." "There's nothing to sort out," Aaliyah said, keeping her tone level even as her pulse thudded in her ears. "You're inventing a situation to justify your behavior." Harlan laughed, but the sound was dry and humorless. "No one's inventing anything, but when someone refuses a lawful request, it tends to raise flags." "You asked to see inside my bag without cause," she replied, "and I said no, which I have the legal right to do." Vance stepped forward slightly, looking between them with unease. "Maybe we should just." Harlan cut him off with a glance, his jaw flexing. "She's escalating this." Aaliyah took a slow breath, raising her hands just slightly in a gesture of peace, not surrender but restraint. "Look, I don't want this to become something it doesn't need to be. I've done nothing wrong. If you have legitimate concerns, I'll be happy to answer questions with proper cause and in the presence of my attorney." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Your attorney?" "Yes," she said, "I'm an attorney myself, and I know exactly where this is going." He stepped in closer now, his chest nearly brushing hers. "Where it's going," he said through clenched teeth, "is wherever I say it goes." "You think flashing your degrees or your name makes you untouchable?" "I think the law makes me untouchable when I haven't broken it," she answered, her voice shaking with tension. "Not fear. You people are all the same." Harlan muttered. "Walk around dressed like royalty, talking like the world owes you something, just waiting for someone to say no so you can start yelling racism and lawsuit. That's the game, isn't it?" Aaliyah blinked, stunned. "Did you just say you heard me?" he snapped. "Officer, I suggest you step back right now." Harlan's hand shot out, ring her wrist with sudden force. She gasped. "Let go of me. You're under investigation," he barked. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting," she protested, twisting away instinctively. Vance hesitated, his hand twitching near his belt, but he didn't move. Harlan yanked harder, wrenching her arm up behind her back. The shopping bag fell to the pavement with a soft thud. The tissue paper fluttering like leaves against the sidewalk. You're hurting me, she said, breath caught in her throat. You should have complied. With one swift movement Harlan swept her legs out from under her. The ground rushed up and Aaliyah's shoulder hit the pavement hard, the impact reverberating through her bones. Her cheek scraped against the concrete and for a moment she couldn't breathe. Her arm was still twisted behind her and Harlan's knee pressed firmly into her back. Don't move, he growled. She gasped against the heat of the sidewalk. Please, you don't have to do this. I gave you a chance, Harlan muttered, leaning down so close she could feel his breath. But you people never know when to shut up. Vance took a half step forward. That's enough. Harlan glared at him but didn't say a word. Aaliyah lay still, gasping, her vision blurred at the edges. The moment dragged long, humiliating and raw. The hot pavement scorched her skin through the fabric of her dress, and the taste of blood had begun to rise faintly in the back of her throat. And still no sign of Marcus, her husband, who she knew without a doubt would be looking for her by now, her protector, her peace. But she also knew what it would mean if he showed up now, what it might cost him to step into this chaos. Harlan stood up and adjusted his vest, yanking her roughly to her feet. Her knees wobbled, her body folding slightly from the blow. Leading go, he said. You're under arrest. For what, she asked through clenched teeth. Obstruction, resisting, and theft, he replied flatly. We'll sort it out at the station. Her voice cracked. This is a mistake. No, he muttered as he pulled her toward the cruiser. This is a message. And just as she stumbled toward the open door of the patrol car, a voice rose behind them, louder than the crowd, louder than the sirens. What are you doing to my wife? Harlan turned his head, and in that instant Marcus Thompson was already running. Marcus Thompson was already moving before his mind could catch up to what his eyes were telling him. The image hit him like a gut punch. Aaliyah, his wife, his partner, her body bent beneath the weight of two officers, her face twisted in pain, her arms restrained behind her back, and her beautiful green dress streaked with dirt and asphalt. One officer had her arm, the other her waist, and in that one sickening second Marcus saw Harlan's elbow land in her ribs. Everything inside him turned to fire. He didn't shout her name, he didn't call out in panic. He sprinted. The crowd had grown in size now. People standing at a distance, phones raised like shields, their faces a mixture of shock, discomfort, and disbelief. Some were murmuring, others whispering to each other, but no one stepped in, not yet. Marcus's footsteps tore across the street, his boots slamming against the pavement with practiced rhythm. The moment felt slowed, like time had staggered under the weight of what he just witnessed. His mind was a blade already slicing through options, calculating the risk, preparing his body to do what needed to be done. Get your hands off my wife, he bellowed, his voice like a whip crack in the open air. Harlan turned, clearly annoyed by the interruption, only for his expression to falter slightly at the sheer force bearing down on him. Marcus wasn't just angry, he was storming forward with purpose, eyes locked in a way that told any trained man that trouble was coming fast. Step back, Harlan shouted, raising a hand to block him. This is a police matter. She's not resisting, Marcus growled, closing the distance in 3 long strides. I saw you hit her. Vance reached for his belt, his hand brushing the hilt of his baton, but his nerves betrayed him. His body wasn't prepared for what came next. Harlan stepped forward, attempting to chest Marcus back. You need to back off now, or Marcus moved. He struck Harlan with the heel of his palm, hard and sharp, just beneath the officer's chin. It was quick, calculated, and designed to disorient without causing permanent damage. Harlan staggered back 2 steps, off balance, arms flailing slightly as he struggled to recover from the sudden jolt. Vance lunged, trying to flank Marcus, but he wasn't fast enough. Marcus pivoted, sweeping low and driving his shoulder into Vance's midsection, using his momentum to drive the officer into the side of the cruiser. The impact was solid, controlled, not reckless, and Vance let out a shocked grunt as his breath left him. Marcus didn't pause. He pressed his forearm against Vance's chest, pinning him with just enough pressure to warn him not to try it again. Put her down, Marcus shouted, eyes flicking back to Harlan, who was already recovering, anger blazing now across his face. Harlan wiped the corner of his mouth where a line of spit hung, then reached for his taser. You just assaulted an officer, he barked. You're done. No, Marcus said, voice low. Dangerous. You are. Aaliyah, still cuffed, struggled to turn herself upright. Her voice was weak, cracked from the earlier blow. Marcus, don't, but it was too late. Harlan lunged. Marcus turned just enough to let the taser arm graze past His shoulder he grabbed Harlan's wrist mid-lunge and twisted it sharply downward. The taser clattered to the ground. With his other hand Marcus slammed the edge of his palm into Harlan's shoulder, forcing him to drop. Further then came the elbow clean fast to the side of Harlan's head. The older officer dropped to a knee. Dave teeth clenched in pain. Marcus breathed hard, his stance low, feet planted. Every movement had purpose. He hadn't trained for street fights, he had trained for close quarter combat under pressure, in dirt and sand, in places where the enemy wore the same face as your friend. And right now these men weren't peacekeepers. They were predators. A woman in the crowd gasped audibly as Harlan fell. Someone else shouted, "He's military," as if trying to explain what they were witnessing. Vance scrambled back to his feet and swung wide, baton now fully drawn. He rushed in hoping to catch Marcus off guard, but Marcus ducked low and delivered a hard palm strike to the inside of Vance's knee. The younger officer dropped with a yelp, clutching his leg in sudden pain. Harlan charged again. This time Marcus met him head-on. They collided with the corner of the cruiser, fists flying. Harlan was stronger than he looked, but he was sloppy, angry, and reckless. Marcus ducked the first wild hook and landed two rapid blows to Harlan's ribs following it. With a knee to the gut, Harlan stumbled, coughing but still upright. Marcus grabbed the back of his vest and slammed him against the hood of the car. The crowd jolted as Harlan's body bounced off the metal, groaning. Aaliyah's breath trembled as she struggled upright again, the cuffs digging into her wrists. She saw Marcus' eyes blazing, fists clenched, posture poised, and she knew he was in it now. This wasn't reaction anymore, this was war. Vance came again, swinging from behind. Marcus turned at the last second, ducked and lifted, throwing the smaller officer clean over his shoulder. Vance landed on the sidewalk with a hard thud. Groaning, Marcus stood in front of Aaliyah, now between her and the men who'd hurt her. His voice was steel. "Touch her again and I swear you'll never walk straight again." Harlan coughed, staggering upright, his hand trembling as it reached for his radio. Marcus stepped forward. "I'm not done." Harlan's hand slammed down on his radio, voice breathless and furious as it cracked through the static. "Unit 342 requesting immediate backup. Officer down. Suspect is violent. Military trained. Send all available units across the street." A valet froze mid-step. People were backing away now, phones still recording, voices rising in a mix of shock, fear, and disbelief. Somewhere a car alarm wailed as someone tripped against a parked vehicle. In the chaos, the moment was no longer just a confrontation, it had become a war zone. In the middle of Buckhead, Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall, body heaving from the blows he had delivered and the ones he'd absorbed. Blood trickled from the corner of his lip and a thin gash ran across the side of his brow, where Vance's baton had connected in a lucky swing. But his eyes never wavered, his body remained locked in a stance bred from years of conditioning, solid, balanced, lethal. Harlan didn't wait for the backup he'd called for. Pride and rage had taken hold. He lunged again, this time going for Marcus's midsection, trying to tackle him to the ground. In a desperate show of brute force, Marcus dropped his weight back, bracing himself, then twisted sideways, allowing Harlan's momentum to carry them both into the open street. They hit the asphalt hard, shoulders slamming into the pavement, grunts tearing from their chests. Harlan landed a punch square across Marcus's jaw. The hit stunned him for a half second, his vision blurred and his head snapped to the side. The taste of copper bloomed in his mouth. Harlan took the moment to grab a handful of Marcus's shirt collar and yank him halfway up. "Think you're tough, boy, you're just another angry." The rest of the sentence never came. Marcus's head snapped forward, smashing into Harlan's nose with a brutal crack. Blood sprayed instantly and the officer let out a howl, falling backward, clutching his face. Marcus rolled to his feet, wiping the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, the metallic taste still sharp on his tongue. His face was calm, terrifyingly so, and behind his eyes burned a fire that would not go out until Aaliyah was safe. Vance charged him from behind, this time not holding back. He swung his baton in a wild arc, aimed for Marcus's ribs. It landed. Marcus gasped, doubling slightly as the pain ignited along his side, but he didn't fall. Instead he pivoted, catching Vance's arm before the second swing could land, with one hand gripping the wrist and the other locking under the elbow. Marcus turned his hips and forced the joint in the opposite direction. Vance screamed. The baton dropped. Marcus didn't hesitate. He swept Vance's legs out and drove him To the ground, pinning him with one knee on his back. He looked down at him, panting, "You picked the wrong couple." Today behind him Harlan was back on his feet, face blooded, nostrils flaring. He reached for his sidearm. The crowd screamed, "Gun, don't do it." Marcus spun, saw the movement. His instincts kicked in. Before thought could he close the gap in 2 strides and slammed into Harlan. Just as the weapon cleared the holster, the gun clattered to the pavement and skidded under a parked car. Marcus roared as he threw Harlan back against the cruiser, one arm around his throat, the other driving punch after punch into his torso. "You think you can put your hands on my wife? You think I won't answer for that?" Harlan tried to fight back, fists flailing, but they were clumsy now, more survival than skill. He landed another strike to Marcus's side, hitting the same bruised rib from earlier. Marcus staggered, pain blooming down his side, and Harlan pounced, slamming his head into Marcus's collarbone. Marcus groaned but held his ground. He gripped Harlan's vest, pivoted his weight, and slammed him hard to the ground. The impact cracked the concrete beneath them. Harlan didn't get back up. Marcus stood over him, chest rising and falling, his arms shaking, not from fear but from restraint. He could have ended him right there, but he didn't. Behind him Vance groaned on the ground. Barely conscious, Aaliyah was kneeling now, her wrists still bound behind her eyes wide with pain and disbelief. Her lip was split and her voice trembled. "Marcus," he turned, his breath catching at the sight of her. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you, baby." The sirens began to wail in the distance, still far but coming fast. He rushed to her, kneeling as gently as he could. His fingers worked quickly at the cuffs. They weren't police grade, cheap flex cuffs, poorly applied. He popped them free, cried out softly as her arms fell forward, circulation returning in sharp needles. Marcus caught her before she could fall and held her close, one hand behind her head. "We have to go," she whispered. "I know," he said. Now he nodded. Once behind them, Harlan groaned, trying to push himself up. Marcus turned toward him, and for one tense moment the 2 men locked eyes. No words were spoken. Marcus scooped Aaliyah into his arms, ignoring the pain in his ribs, the sweat and blood on his skin, and the eyes of the crowd still staring, still filming. The people parted for them. No one moved to stop them as they disappeared into the alleyway behind the boutique. Tires screamed at the end of the block. The hunt had begun. The sirens tore through the silence like claws raking across glass, splitting the quiet hum of the city. With urgency and fury they echoed through alleys and over rooftops, bouncing off polished storefronts and narrow brick corridors, as if the entire city had been given a single command: hunt. Marcus gripped Aaliyah's hand firmly, not just to guide her but to keep her grounded. Her steps were uneven at first, her body still rattled from the assault, her mind trying to keep pace with the present after the chaos had ruptured every sense of peace they'd known. He moved with practiced urgency, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, calculating every angle, every blind spot, every shadow that might hide danger or escape. The sharp pain that radiated from his side where the baton had landed earlier pulsed with each movement, but he kept going. There was no room for hesitation, no space for pain. Aaliyah was beside him, her breath shallow, her green dress torn near the hem, her wrists raw where the flex cuffs had bitten into her skin. The blood on her lip had dried into a sharp copper line. She hadn't cried, she wouldn't not. Yet they moved like ghosts through the alleyways, slipping behind locked gates, stepping over trash bins, navigating narrow paths between buildings that Marcus remembered from years ago when he'd studied escape routes for missions far from home. His instincts weren't just intact, they were burning. "We keep east," he said as they darted behind a boarded-up storefront. The low hum of passing cruisers barely missing them by a breath. "Stay low, keep in shadow, no phones, no credit cards, they'll be tracking everything now." Aaliyah nodded, her voice thin but steady. "I left my phone in my bag. They have it good, we don't need them tracing you from this point forward. We go dark." They slipped past a delivery truck idling in a side lot and ducked through the gate of a small church parking area. The building's floodlights hadn't kicked on yet, which gave them just enough cover to slide behind a series of hedges before making their way toward the back of a residential alley. The world hadn't stopped moving, cars still passed, music still played somewhere faintly from a rooftop bar, but the normality of the world outside didn't matter anymore. The weight of what had just happened pressed into them like a fog for those watching from their apartments behind their screens or from the edge of the sidewalk with phones still recording. They were no longer a Husband and wife they were fugitives dangerous. Black Marcus's mind moved. Ahead he didn't speak as they turned down a narrow walkway behind an apartment building where broken fences revealed a gap between properties, but he was already forming the next step, already reaching for the network he hadn't touched in years. As they emerged on the far side of the alley, he pulled out a small scratched phone from inside his boot, a burner he hadn't used since the last time he helped extract a fellow soldier out of international waters. He powered it on, waited the seconds for the secure module to load, then tapped into a hidden contact chain buried in encrypted code. He didn't look up as he typed the rhythm familiar, the sense of purpose. Sharp call sign orbital status secure, requesting extraction protocol, civilian compromised, pursuit active, need safe house access within seconds. The screen blinked again. Alpha 3 safe house access point through Bellflower Apartments underground garage side entrance only, no lights, ETA minutes on foot, quiet route advised. Marcus turned to Aaliyah, his voice low steady. We've got a place not far off grid, friend of mine from before, he's reliable. She looked up at him, her face pale but her eyes burning with clarity. Military used to run communication lines off record, helped extract civilians during unlisted ops. He still owes me this safe house is buried in the back of a garage beneath a closed complex. No surveillance, no neighbors. They moved fast, cutting through a narrow pedestrian path between buildings and crossing beneath a canopy of overgrown ivy that shaded the back lot of an old abandoned preschool. The city shifted around them as they traveled. Clean sidewalks gave way to cracked pavement and the polished edges of Buckhead began to erode behind them. In the distance another siren cut the air. It was closer now. When they reached the access point, an old dented metal door behind a row of shuttered storage units. Marcus keyed in the passcode from memory. The keypad clicked, the lock disengaged and the door groaned open just wide enough for them to slip inside. The underground parking structure was empty save for a few abandoned vehicles and oil-stained concrete. At the far end a storage base stood slightly ajar, its heavy sliding door blending into the shadow of the wall. Inside was a single cot, a table, a shelf of canned food, water jugs and an old tactical bin with faded lettering. A single exposed bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a warm humming light over everything. Aaliyah collapsed onto the cot, not in exhaustion but in release. Her breathing slowed, controlled but heavy, and for a long moment she said nothing. Marcus stood near the door listening to the silence, watching the flicker of the single light bulb. When he finally turned to her, his voice was softer. Are you okay? She nodded, but only once. I think I left my voice back there, she said, eyes cast down at her hands which were still trembling faintly. I couldn't even speak. At the end I just froze. He walked to her, slowly crouching beside her. You didn't freeze, you survived, you made it out, you're here. Her eyes lifted. They'll twist it, all of it, the video, the angles, they'll take what you did and turn it into something savage. They already have, Marcus replied. He gestured toward the small TV mounted in the upper corner of the garage. A breaking news report flickered across the screen. No sound, just captions: suspects wanted for assault on officers considered armed and dangerous. Aaliyah's throat tightened. They're not going to stop. They'll come for our careers, our names, everything. Then we stopped them first. He crossed to the bin and retrieved a compact laptop wrapped in cloth and stashed beneath a bundle of tools. It was slow to boot but powerful, still linked to an encrypted satellite network Marcus hadn't used since his last contract. He set it on the table and opened a terminal window. First we wipe our trail, he said. Second, we monitor their communications, radio chatter, dispatch logs, media leaks, everything they say about us we intercept. Aaliyah stood now, her balance firming as her clarity returned. And then we start building our case. He glanced at her, one eyebrow lifted. We expose them, she said. Not just what happened today, all of it. Their history, complaints, any dirt that was buried, we drag it into the light. Marcus smiled faintly. The first real trace of it since the day began. Then let's build the fire. The sun had barely cracked the sky when the first squad car rolled past Aaliyah's former office on Forsyth Street, light flashing, tires screeching against the pavement. Within the hour the entire city seemed to be pulsing with one coordinated command: find them. The manhunt began with surgical precision, door knocks, public statements, strategically placed press updates, and constant pressure on every street camera. and license plate reader from Midtown to Dakar. By the time the morning news cycles refreshed, every station had a still of Marcus and Aaliyah plaster across their homepage cropped from shaky bystander footage. The videos circulating online weren't full, they were edited, clipped at just the right second to show a blur of motion, a flash of fists, and image of Marcus overpowering two uniformed officers, and a caption that made the lie feel true. Former soldier attacks police in Buckhead. Wife accomplice in every grocery store, every gas station, every downtown cafe with a wall-mounted TV. Their faces glared back in frozen frames framed by words like fugitive, hostile, and armed. The footage never showed Aaliyah pinned to the ground, never showed the moment Harlan's elbow struck her ribs or the way her voice broke when she tried to say she was a lawyer. All of that had been cut, edited, discarded. At the firm, Aaliyah's desk sat untouched, her computer locked behind a security code no one could override. But that didn't stop the questions. HR was called into emergency meetings. Partners whispered in closed-door rooms, wondering how this could be happening. A junior associate was pulled aside for questioning, asked if she'd ever seen Aaliyah behave erratically. Another was grilled on whether Aaliyah had expressed any political opinions that might seem extreme. No one asked how she had handled years of high-profile cases with elegance, or how many pro bono hours she had logged defending people the system left behind. Instead, someone quietly printed out a copy of her resignation form and slid it into a sealed envelope just in case the board decided to distance themselves preemptively. Across the city, Marcus's name began surfacing in old classified documents, his deployments, commendations, combat zones. Someone leaked pieces of his service record to the press, not the parts that told the truth of what he'd done to protect lives, but the vague, incomplete parts. Special forces operative involved in covert conflict. A commentator on a late-night panel referred to him as high-risk, highly trained, potentially unstable. That last word was the one that stuck inside the safe house. Marcus watched the news in silence. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his face still, but Aaliyah could feel the tension rolling off of him like heat. He hadn't spoken for several minutes. They're controlling the narrative, she finally said, sitting beside him on the cot. They're making you the villain. His voice was low, hollow. They need someone to point to, someone who fits the story they've already told themselves. She nodded. And someone to distract from the fact that Harlan and Vance assaulted an unarmed woman in broad daylight. He turned to her, his gaze sharp again. We need to get ahead of this. Aaliyah stood pacing. Now I'm working on it. I reached out to Maya in public records. She said she'll try to pull the original 911 logs, but it's risky. If the call was internal, they might have skipped the dispatcher and gone straight through. We need body cam footage, unedited. There's a window, Marcus said, if we can find someone inside the department who doesn't buy their version of the story, we can use that. If not, we go back to my backup plan, which is he opened one of the storage bins, revealing a second laptop and a file marked with a Delta unit number. We make the truth louder than the lie. Somewhere across town, on the floor of Atlanta PD's Internal Affairs Bureau, Detective Elena Reyes leaned back in her chair, the early footage of the altercation frozen on her screen, her brow furrowed as she scrubbed through the timeline for the third time, watching frame by frame how the officers approached Aaliyah, how the interaction escalated, and how quickly it was cut. The raw version hadn't been easy to access. Someone in the department had tried to overwrite it with the edited copy, but Elena had seen enough internal sabotage over the years to know when a file had been tampered with. She'd gone digging herself, bypassing the filters, hunting the data at its root, and what she found didn't match the narrative at all. She leaned closer, paused on a frame where Aaliyah was flat on the ground, Harlan's hand pressed into the back of her neck. The time stamp showed several seconds before Marcus arrived. She zoomed in. No weapon, no resisting, just fear. Officer Harlan, she muttered, glancing down at the complaint log she'd printed hours earlier. 4 citizen complaints in the past year, 3 dismissed, 1 sealed. She picked up her phone and dialed a secure extension. Ia dispatch. The voice on the line answered. This is Reyes, she said. I want the original shift logs for officers Harlan and Vance last hours. Also flag any internal memos referencing the Thompson incident. Any reason you want us to tag it? Yes, she said, because something About this stinks, and if the city's about to crucify a soldier and a lawyer based on edited footage and false reports, I'm not going to stand by and watch it happen. Back in the garage, Aaliyah paced near the small table as Marcus tapped through encrypted data logs. Her laptop showed multiple browser tabs: news stories, public comments, social media posts. The court of public opinion was already in session. I don't know how long Maya can stall, she said. She's risking her job. She won't be the only one, Marcus replied. People know what they saw, even if they afraid to admit it. Aaliyah turned to him, her voice unwavering. Now then, we make it impossible for them to look away. The walls of the warehouse were lined with metal shelves covered in dusty tools, old router, outdated hard drives, and tangled cables coiled like dormant snakes. It wasn't the kind of place that screamed precision, but Marcus knew better. The inside was chaos. Only two strangers to the man who lived here. It was an arsenal. Derek Hayes sat hunched over three open laptops, his eyes flicking between lines of code as if they were words in a foreign language only he could read. His fingers moved quickly, navigating through encrypted pathways and bypassing firewalls with an ease that came from years of training no civilian institution would ever acknowledge. I didn't think I'd be hearing from you again, Derek said, not looking up. You drop out of the world for years, then suddenly you're on every news channel. Must be serious. It is, Marcus replied, standing near the makeshift workbench while Aaliyah leaned against the concrete pillar beside him, her arms crossed tightly, a small scab still darkening the corner of her mouth. Derek finally looked up. So what exactly are you trying to prove? Aaliyah stepped forward. That the body cam footage was doctored. Derek raised an eyebrow. You're not wrong. I've already seen what they released. The audio scrubbed in 3 places. Time stamps jump forward twice. Subtle enough that civilians won't catch it, but obvious if you know where to look. And the most critical thing, they cut the footage seconds before your husband arrives. Marcus exhaled slowly. So we were right. You were right, Derek said, but that doesn't mean proving it will be easy. The footage was altered after it left the standard evidence pipeline. Someone with internal access rerouted it from the patrol car to an off-grid server before it hit the official storage system. Then we tracked the off-grid server, Aaliyah said. Derek gave a low whistle, leaning back in his chair. I mean, I admire the confidence, but you don't just track a shadow server from inside the department. These things are firewalled tighter than Fort Bragg. You'd need someone who still works inside and isn't afraid of losing everything. Marcus and Aaliyah exchanged a glance. Aaliyah spoke first. What if we already have someone at the Atlanta Police Department's Central Precinct? Officer Jamal Kendrick leaned against a vending machine in the break room, eyes fixed on the flashing screen of his phone. He kept the volume muted as the news segment played on repeat. Edited footage of the Buckhead incident, once again portraying Marcus as the aggressor. He paused the video and stared at the Tim stamp. It didn't match what he remembered. Absolutely. Here is the revised version with apostrophes added to all dialogue and text messages. While keeping the immersive tone and avoiding short sentences, Jamal had been stationed at the remote feed terminal the night the footage came through, a quiet assignment tucked away in the back hall of the precinct, the kind of place where no one asked questions unless the system went dark. He wasn't even supposed to be there, not officially. His regular rotation had ended an hour earlier, but Officer Lenz had begged him to swap shifts so he could catch his daughter's recital. Jamal had said yes without thinking, just like he always did when people assumed he had nowhere else to be. That night had been slow, boring. Even the feed was lagging, the database overloaded with backlogs from body cams across the city. He was helping another tech clear out corrupted files when the screen flickered just once and a fresh feed landed in the review queue. He hadn't expected anything serious. Most of the clips that passed through were routine traffic stops, domestic calls, noise complaints, but something about this one made him pause. The footage opened with a wide view of the sidewalk in front of the boutique. He saw a woman, black, well-dressed, clearly unarmed, walking calmly with a shopping bag in one hand. 2 officers approached from the side, both white, both grinning like they already knew how it would go. Jamal didn't recognize the woman at first, not until the camera angle caught her face and he realized she was a lawyer. He'd seen her on the city newsletter, something about a civil rights panel. Then Harlan grabbed Her wrist, the bag fell from her hand, landing on the concrete with a muffled thud. She stepped back, clearly startled. Her mouth moved, words forming without panic, just confusion, a plea, maybe a question, but then Vance stepped in, his hand already reaching for cuffs. That's when she screamed loud and sudden, not from pain but from fear, from the sheer weight of disbelief that it was actually happening. Jamal had watched the footage twice, frozen in his chair as the seconds unfolded. The second time he leaned forward, eyes narrowed, replaying the exact frame when she hit the pavement, her head bouncing once against the curb. There was no resistance, no threat, no call for backup, just aggression, calculated, clean. And then the screen blinked. The file was gone, just like that, overwritten, replaced by a corrupted placeholder that looped a static-filled snippet from another unit's traffic stop. No trace, no archive, like it never existed at all. He didn't say anything, not that night, not the next morning. He just carried it around in his chest like a lead weight, hoping someone else had seen it too, that maybe it would show up again, that maybe, just maybe, there had been some misunderstanding. But the days passed and the silence stretched. Then came the press conference. The footage they released showed only a brief altercation, blurry, distant, out of context. The news anchors parroted the department's version. The suspect had resisted arrest. The male suspect had assaulted officers. The narrative was clean, rehearsed, airtight. Jamal sat at his desk with the screen muted, watching his superiors lie without flinching. That night his phone buzzed, an unknown number. The message was short: "You saw it, we know. You can't ignore this." He stared at the screen for a long time, the glow of it painting his hands in cold light. His heart pounded as he scanned the empty break room. Coffee stains dotted the table beside him, the vending machine humming in the corner like nothing had changed. He set the phone down slowly, resting both hands on the table. He didn't recognize the number, but the message felt surgical, precise. Whoever sent it wasn't guessing, they knew. He picked up the phone again and typed back, his fingers unsteady. "I'm not a part of this, I don't want to be." The reply came almost instantly, as if they'd been waiting for him to break. "Then meet us, help us fix it." He didn't move for a long time, just stared at those words while the world outside the precinct continued spinning. Unaware, the voices of other officers echoed faintly from the hall. Someone was laughing near the stairwell. A door slammed 2 rooms over. His thumb hovered above the screen. He thought about the woman in the footage, Aaliyah, about how fast it had all happened, about how easy it was to destroy someone with a badge and a lie. He exhaled once, slow and tight, then typed back, "When and where?" "Back at the warehouse." Marcus leaned over Derek's shoulder as a map of internal server routes loaded onto the screen. Aaliyah stood beside them, arms folded, her eyes focused. "The internal video storage pipeline has a gateway node here," Derek said, point to a red cluster near the precinct's administrative wing, "but the secondary signal got hijacked and rerouted through an access point reserved for internal reviews. You'd need a key code with command access. Someone had help," Aaliyah murmured, "or someone was ordered to do it," Marcus added. Marcus spun his chair slightly to face them. "If you're serious about going after this, you'll need 3 things. 1, a full chain of custody for the footage, which means someone inside willing to testify about what they saw before the edit. 2, the original footage or a fragment that wasn't scrubbed. And 3, proof of misconduct from the officers involved. We're working on all 3, Aaliyah said. Jamal Kendrick saw the footage before it was replaced. He just agreed to meet. Marcus glanced at her. "You trust him?" "No," she said, "but I believe he's scared, and fear makes people honest." Derek stood and crossed to the corner, opening a black case the size of a briefcase. Inside was a recording device no larger than a paperback, an untraceable field recorder designed to intercept and store any digital or audio input. "Take this with you," he said. "If he says anything useful, we log it." Marcus took the device without a word as they prepared to leave. Derek pulled Marcus aside. "You're really doing this, going head to head with the entire department?" "We don't have a choice." Derek's voice dropped. "You're not just going to burn the system, you're going to make enemies who never stop looking." Marcus's expression didn't waver. "Then let them come." Outside, the sky was deepening into violet, the city lighting up with the hum of another restless night. Somewhere inside those towers and concrete walls were the men who had tried to bury the truth. Now Aaliyah and Marcus were digging it back out piece by piece. The air inside the warehouse had shifted since Jamal's message came through. It wasn't tension, it was clarity. A shared purpose had settled over the group. Like the final click of a locked chamber, Marcus stood over the table, arms folded, watching the encrypted message. Scrolled to its end. Aaliyah sat beside him, back straight, her laptop screen open. To the list of formal complaints she'd compiled against Harlan and Vance over the last 2 hours. None of them had stuck, but together they painted a story across the room. Derek hunched over his rig, fingers dancing across the keyboard as he encrypted another chain of files into cold storage. Every image, every frame, every audio bite pulled from internal logs and security feeds now lived inside a set of air-gapped drives he had sealed into a lead-lined case beneath the floor hatch. "I'll keep it all here," he said without turning untraceable. "Not even satellite can sniff it out." Marcus stepped over. "And if something happens, then it's rigged to go live." Derek replied, "Audit dumped to 3 independent press contacts and a whistleblower archive overseas. No redactions, no edits. Their truth dies with me. Ours lives on." Aaliyah let out a quiet breath, absorbing the weight of that backup plan. She had trusted evidence all her life, facts, logic, testimony, but this was the first time she'd ever seen the system that held it manipulated so deliberately. The law alone wouldn't save them. The truth had to be engineered to survive the storm. A new alert blinked on Derek's screen. Jamal Kendrick had arrived. He stepped in through the side door, his expression taut beneath the brim of his patrol cap. He wasn't in uniform, but his posture still held the discipline of the badge. His hands fidgeted once near his jacket pocket before he tucked them into his sides. "I don't know how long I can stay," he said. "You stayed this long," Marcus replied. "That means something." Jamal hesitated, then pulled a flash drive from his pocket and handed it to Derek. "I pulled this before the review server wiped it. It's not full video, just the segment from the feed. RTER the moment Harlan hit her time code included." Derek plugged it in, eyes flicking across the screen. Aaliyah leaned forward. "Is it clean?" Derek nodded. "Once lossless. Timestamp matches the dispatch logs, no compression. This is gold." Jamal didn't look proud. If anything, he looked ashamed. "I didn't speak up when I first saw it," he said. "I was afraid of the department, of what it would mean to be the one who turned against the shield. But I can't watch them lie anymore. I can't let them destroy you both to cover themselves." Aaliyah's voice was gentle. "We don't need you to take them down. We just need you to help us catch them in the ACT." Jamal looked at her, confused. How? Marcus turned to the whiteboard Derek had scrolled notes across earlier, grabbing a marker. "We use the pattern Harlan and Vance prey on women. They think they can intimidate black women alone, dressed well, in the wrong neighborhood. They profile, harass, escalate. That's their routine, so we give them exactly what they want." "No," Jamal said immediately. "That's too dangerous." But Aaliyah was already nodding. "If they believe I'm someone new, someone vulnerable, and you report me as a potential suspect like before, they'll come. They won't know they're walking into surveillance." Derek tapped the side of the case under the table. "We wire the location, 3 camera angles, 2 boom mics plus a parabolic receiver that'll catch everything in AT radius. If they say anything that even hints at racial profiling, misconduct, or abuse, we'll have them." Jamal looked between them all, his voice quiet but firm. "You understand what you're asking her to do? You're putting her back in front of the same wolves who attacked her." "She knows," Marcus said. Aaliyah nodded. "I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing it because if we don't, they'll keep doing this to other women, to other people who won't have someone like Marcus to pull them off the ground." Derek glanced back over his shoulder. "I'll prep the gear tonight. Give me a location." Jamal hesitated, then nodded. "There's an abandoned diner 3 blocks off H-Way. No cameras. It's still flagged in the patrol system as quiet zone. They use it when they want to keep things unofficial." "Perfect," Marcus said. "You log the call like you did last time. Say you spotted someone matching a suspect. Report. Ask for Harlan and Vance. Make it look like you're trying to help them clean it up. Quiet." "And when it's done," Jamal asked. Aaliyah stepped forward. "We take the footage to someone who can't ignore it. Public defenders, press, internal affairs. Whatever it takes, and we release it in full, unedited." Derek's voice was calm but heavy. "Once the trap is sprung, I'll hold the master file. If anything happens to either of you, it goes out to the world. No press spin, no filters." Jamal glanced down at his badge. "I never thought it would come to this," he said. "Neither did we," Marcus replied, "but here we are in together." In the dim light of the warehouse, the plan took shape. Not just To clear their names but to expose the system that had been protecting predators in uniform for far too long. The wolves had hunted in the dark, now it was their turn to step into the light. The air inside the warehouse was sharp, with tension, every breath filled with a quiet anticipation that buzzed between the four of them. A soft click echoed as Derek Hayes slipped the final encrypted micro drive into its case and locked it into place beneath the trapdoor hatch. In the corner, Marcus stood over the table, arms crossed, eyes locked on the whiteboard, where the plan had taken form. Bullet points, timestamps, building schematics, all written with the meticulous care of a soldier preparing for a mission where failure wasn't an option. Jamal Kendrick stood near the center of the room, his phone in hand, staring down at the contact on the screen. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low, shoulders tense beneath his coat. "You're the only one who can do it," Marcus replied. "They won't come unless the message comes from someone they trust." Aaliyah, composed and calm, "Make it sound real familiar, not too polished. Give them exactly what they want to hear." Jamal swallowed hard and nodded, then pressed the call button. The room fell into silence except for the distant hum of the server fans. The line rang once, twice. On the third ring, a gruff voice answered. Harlan. Jamal took a shallow breath and let his voice fall into that familiar rhythm, just casual enough to disarm, just official enough to sound routine. "Hey, it's Kendrick. Got something strange just now I figured you might want to take a look at before it goes up the chain." A pause, then Harlan's voice sharpened. "What kind of strange?" Jamal paced slowly as he spoke, moving like someone thinking. A loud woman matching the Thompson wife's profile, black, early dressed, sharp, walking fast near Holloway, looked like she didn't want to be seen, slipped into the old diner, the one that got shut down after the health code violations. Harlan made a low sound in his throat, half skeptical, half intrigued. "That's 2 blocks from the Thompson footage dump spot." "Exactly," Jamal said. "Could be coincidence, could be someone trying to move something sensitive while the department's still in cleanup mode. She's carrying a leather case, sat in the back corner, and hasn't looked up since." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Harlan's tone shifted, amused. "And you're calling me? Why exactly?" Jamal let the bait slip forward carefully. "Because this feels like one of those things that could either disappear clean or blow up in someone's face, and I know you've been looking for a chance to handle things off paper." Harlan chuckled, low and smug. "You think it's her?" "No," Jamal replied. "I think it's someone connected to her. Maybe trying to clean up loose ends, or maybe bait. Either way, it's quiet. No cameras, no backup. You and Vance come in quiet. You might get something worth handing off to the higher-ups or not. I don't care, just figured I'd throw it your way before I reported officially." "You sure she's alone?" Harlan asked. "Watched her go in myself." Jamal lied smoothly. "She hasn't moved. Case is still on the table. Looks expensive. She's nervous but trying not to show it." Another pause, then Harlan's voice turned confident. "All right, don't do anything. We'll be there." And he hung up. Jamal lowered the phone slowly and turned to face the others. "They're coming." The diner was dark and hollow, stripped of its old furnishings and left with only shadows and dust for company, but the bones were still there, the booths, the counter, the smeared windows that let in fractured afternoon light. Aaliyah sat in the back corner, as planned, posture relaxed but alert, her sweater draped neatly across her shoulders, the leather case beside her giving the illusion of purpose. Above her, a pinhole camera tucked into the ceiling vent watched every movement. 2 more were hidden inside a ceiling light and the leg of a table against the far wall. Derek's custom field mics had been calibrated for directional clarity, their receivers already feeding live into the laptop. Back in the surveillance van parked a block away, cameras are live, Derek said over the comm audio. "Clean, you're clear to roll." Marcus's voice came next, steady and low in her earpiece. "I'm outside, visual sweep every." "I've got you." Aaliyah said nothing. She sat still, breathing in slow rhythm, eyes flicking occasionally toward the door, then returning to the worn leather strap of the case at her side. Her palms rested open on her lap. She didn't have to fake the tension in her stomach, she just had to wait. The cruiser arrived exactly minutes later, pulling up without headlights, tires whispering over gravel. Harlan stepped out first, the corners of his coat tugged down with self-importance. Vance followed, slower, shoulders hunched. "Looks like she's still inside," Harlan muttered, glancing toward the diner. "You see the case?" "Yeah," Vance said quietly. "Right on the table." Harlan smirked. "Bet it's nothing, but let's have a little fun before we call it." And they entered the Diner without drawing their weapon. This wasn't that kind of encounter, not. Yet Harlan moved with that deliberate air of control, the kind of posture that came from years of unchecked authority. When he spotted her, he smiled. Well, he said, stepping into her space without invitation. What brings someone like you to a place like this? Aaliyah didn't flinch. She met his gaze. Waiting on a ride? Harlan nodded toward the case. That your delivery client files. He chuckled. Mind if I take a peek? I do, she said. You don't have a warrant? Harlan lowered his voice. You don't really think warrants apply here, do you? Behind the glass of a nearby utility lamp, the camera blinked twice. Still recording? You're not the first one to sit in that booth thinking the law would shield them, Harlan continued. Let me guess, you're another activist. Got a blog, maybe an audience? Aaliyah didn't answer. Vance stood silently nearby, his arms folded, gaze flicking nervously toward the back exit. Harlan stepped closer. See, people like you come into our city thinking you're above the rules, but we're the ones who write the rules. We decide who walks and who gets walked out. Interesting, Aaliyah said coolly. You don't sound like someone sworn to serve and protect. Harlan leaned in. Protect who? People like you. You think I didn't know the kind of trouble you and your husband would bring the second I saw you two in that shop? His voice dropped lower. You weren't supposed to fight back. You were supposed to fold, disappear like the rest. Then a voice cut through the silence behind him. You just admitted it all. Harlan froze. Marcus stepped into the light, his expression hard focused. Behind him, Jamal Kendrick emerged, holding up his badge. Every word Jamal said, his voice steady. All recorded, all stored, all time stamped. Harlan's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, the control he always wielded like a weapon had been ripped from his grasp. Aaliyah stood slowly, lifting the leather case and resting it on her arm. We didn't need you to believe we were guilty, she said. We just needed you to believe you were untouchable. And for the first time, Harlan understood that he wasn't. Harlan's breath came hard and fast as the weight of what just happened crashed down around him. His hands twitched near his belt, not quite reaching for his weapon, but no longer pretending to be calm either. His jaw clenched so tightly it seemed he might crack his own teeth. You set us up, he spat, the words cracking against the stale air inside the diner. This was entrapment. Jamal Kendrick stood beside the door, his badge still out, his stance unreadable. No, he said firmly, this was exposure and you gave us everything we needed. Vance looked shaken, now pale around the eyes. We should go. We need to. We're not going anywhere, Harlan snapped. He pointed at Marcus. You're a thug. You jumped us, put 2 cops in the hospital. You were beating my wife on a public street. Marcus replied, voice cold. What did you think was going to happen? Harlan turned to Aaliyah, his face red, his fury barely restrained. You think this little show changes anything? That anyone's going to believe a couple of criminals with a grudge and a camera? Aaliyah stepped forward, unshaken. Her voice was like iron wrapped in velvet. They're going to believe every second. Because we have more than one camera, more than one feed, more than your voice bragging about targeting women who look like me. Harlan sneered. Your word against ours. You doctored that video just like you doctored the first one. Her eyes didn't flinch. You're right about one thing, she said. The first video was doctored, not by us, by you. The body cam footage from that day, we tracked the metadata. It was pulled from your unit and routed through a private review server that doesn't exist in the department's official directory. The audio was compressed, the timestamp skipped. She stepped closer, each word cutting sharper than the last. But what you didn't count on is that someone saved a copy of the raw feed before it disappeared. We have that too, the real footage, the missing seconds, the part where you slammed me to the ground while I was already cuffed, the part where you said, and I quote, this is a message. Harlan's mouth moved but no words came. You're lying, he muttered. No, Jamal said. She's not. I saw it myself. That's what made come forward. Vance looked like he might be sick. Harlan took a half step forward, his chest puffed, trying to reclaim dominance. You want to drag me down in the media? You want to go to war with me? Fine, you better pray nothing leaks about you two that you didn't mean to come out. Aaliyah smiled, then not cruel, not gloating, but with the quiet confidence of a woman who had walked through hell and survived it. We didn't come here to gloat, Harlan. We came here to give you a chance to hear what's coming before the rest of the world. As she reached into the leather case on the table and pulled out a single envelope, placing it down gently in front of him. Inside is a summary of every complaint ever filed against you, she said. including the ones that never made it past internal review. You remember Keisha Reynolds' high school teacher pulled over. On her way to her night class report dismissed. I found her. She gave a sworn statement. Harlan's hands were fists, now knuckles white. You don't want this to go any further, he hissed. It already has, Marcus said, stepping beside his wife. You just don't know it yet. Jamal opened the diner door. You can walk out now, or you can be walked out later. Harlan stared at them, but for all his bluster, for all his years of power, something inside him understood this was over. He grabbed the envelope and stalked past them, brushing Jamal's shoulder as he passed through the doorway. Vance lingered a moment longer. He looked at Aaliyah, then at Marcus, then finally down at the floor. I didn't mean for it to go that far, he mumbled. Aaliyah met his eyes. But you let it. He nodded once and left. Back at the warehouse, Derek was already scrubbing through the final capture footage, syncing it with the recovered raw body cam file from Jamal's flash drive. The difference was unmistakable. The apartment's version skipped, blurred, compressed the truth until it was convenient. The raw file showed everything, her voice pleading for them to stop Harlan's violence, the crowd forming, Marcus's approach unedited. It was damning, combined with the footage from the sting. It was career-ending. Derek leaned back in his chair, jaws set. They're going to bury this, mark my words. Then we bury them first, Marcus replied.